You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 146. This podcast is dedicated to CIRCUS. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into this world. Hey, friends, fans, and foes. I'm Shannon McKenna. I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast, and my cats are going absolutely bananas right now, and there's really nothing I can do about it. So if you hear massive amounts of very expensive things smashing in the background, that's them. If you love what you're listening to every single week, you can go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and sign up to become a Patreon. I'm making this quick and dirty this week because I know it's the most annoying part for you. But if it's the most annoying part for you, it's probably because you know you should be signing up for Patreon because you do, in fact, love what you're listening to. You just haven't pulled the trigger yet. You haven't gone there and you haven't done it. Let's make this the week. Let's make this the time. One more time for it. Patreon.com/theartistathlete. The link is always in the show notes. So before I tell you about the guest this week, let me tell y'all a little something. So this show has aerialists, yes, because I'm a professional aerialist, but I really wanted to make a very conscious decision from the get that this would be a podcast that's dedicated not to aerial arts, but to circus. That's why it's got jugglers and tumblers and directors and physios and mental health professionals and all sorts of other people in industries that are in or adjacent to circus. And I did this because, to quote one of my favorite poets, the great Maya Angelou, "We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike." And as I've been doing more and more episodes, I've noticed that there are definite threads and themes that run through the podcast independent of the discipline or the field of study that the guest has. And one of the threads I've been noticing, one of the big questions, is who mentors the mentor? Now, in the past, I've had guests in the aerial dance realm tackle this question, people like Nancy Smith and Chantal McCormick, both of whom are mentioned also in this interview with today's guest. But I've also had guests such as Jay Gilligan and Victor Key who can talk about juggling. I've had former performers, now directors like Gypsy Snyder or Isabelle Chassé, or even Aurelia Katz, who now has her own production company. People who are legends in the industry who are now tackling this question of how do I support, yes, the next generation, but also who's there to support me? What do you do? Who do you look ahead to? Obviously, I don't have the answer to this question. What do I know? But I really love this topic. I think it's something we can all learn from and consider. And today's guest talks about it so beautifully, so candidly, with so much compassion and also energy. And I'm really excited to let you guys in on the conversation. My guest today is Lindsey Butcher. Since graduating from the London School of Contemporary Dance, Lindsey has worked with numerous dance, theater, opera companies, and directors as a dancer, aerialist, teacher, mentor, and choreographer. In 1989, Lindsey joined Ra Ra Zoo's Circus Theater and began further training in aerial silks. Her circus credits as a performer, teacher, and advisor include Ra Ra Zoo, No Ordinary Angels, Gandini Juggling Project, Scarbius, Yes No's, Lost and Found Orchestra, Upswing, and she has been a long-term collaborator with the Irish aerial dance company Fidget Feet. Lindsey remains a proud and, frankly, still astonished Guinness World Record holder for synchronized aerial fabrics. She is an established aerial dance teacher at the aerial dance festivals in both the UK and across Europe. As a founding member of the Vertical Dance Forum, Lindsey teaches masterclasses internationally, directing a 2-week vertical dance choreographic lab in Brazil, and most recently, a masterclass in Venice. Much of her vertical dance choreographic experience and development has been through collaborations with Scarbius Aerial Dance Theater. In 2003, Lindsey founded Gravity and Levity, a disabled-led aerial dance company. Lindsey is hearing impaired. Gravity and Levity founded and runs the European Aerial Dance Festival, now in its 11th year, alongside a vast array of CPD opportunities for artists at all levels of their practice. Here's my interview with Lindsey Butcher. Lindsey Butcher, welcome to the Artist Athlete podcast.
Hey, thank you very much. And seeing you, hear you, Shannon.
I know, it's such a delight. And I'm not screaming over 100 people at a gymnasium right next to you and yet so far away.
Yeah, sorry, I can turn my hearing aids down, so that's okay.
Oh man, I wish everyone was that lucky. I'm sure my parents really wish that. So to start off, who are you and what do you do?
Oh, okay.
Right.
So I'm Lindsey Butcher. Who am I? What do I do? Well,
We're getting very existential very early.
we are, aren't we? So I describe myself as an aerial dance practitioner, an independent aerial dance practitioner, and I'm also artistic director of an aerial dance company called Gravity and Levity. I kind of split my time between freelancing and running the company.
Commonly, people start with some kind of movement practice as a child, dance, gymnastics. What was your gateway drug?
So I started as a kid. I went to dance class probably from about the age of 5. Went during the week. So I did that, from about the age of 5 through until 16. And then at 16, I went to study at London Contemporary Dance School in London, called The Place. And I was there for 4 years.
Where are you from originally?
I'm from Yorkshire, north of England.
I don't know why I ask like I know English geography very well at all. But and do you live there now? Where are you located currently?
No, I'm in Brighton now, which is on the south coast.
Yes, that's on the beach. I do know that one.
The beach, yeah.
Right. Contemporary dance led to aerial dance. And did that happen in London as well?
It did happen in London, yeah. So after I left London Contemporary, I joined a contemporary dance company called Extemporary Dance Theatre. It's a long time ago. We're talking 80s here, Shannon.
Yeah.
Either in my second or third year, the artistic director of the company asked one of us to learn Spanish web for a piece that was in the company rep. And I met a woman called Sue Broadway, who was the co-artistic director of a company called Rara Zoo. Sue was also a founder member of Circus Oz. I trained with her, learned Spanish web and loved it, and trained with them whenever they were in the country because they were touring a lot at the time. Sue came back into Extemporary Dance Theatre a couple of years later and made a full-length aerial ballet on the company, on a whole bunch of contemporary dancers. We really didn't have the arm strength. It was quite hilarious watching it.
Yeah, and when you're talking about aerial in this context, because I think people, like, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. When you're saying aerial at that time, are you talking about like harness work, rope, silks? What does aerial mean at this time?
Well, I think Sue had to be quite imaginative with us as contemporary dancers without that degree of upper body strength. And so there was a big net that was rigged across the stage. I think I did static cloud swing. Yeah, so it was that kind of thing. But it was quite hilarious because I remember we were still performing at the time that we'd train in the morning with Sue and then we'd do shows in the evening. And there'd be some days when we just couldn't get into our costumes. You know, we'd have to help each other because we couldn't actually lift our arms up to get into the costume because we just weren't used to that kind of upper body intense training.
What other components did you find harrowing? Were you nervous by the height? What else was difficult about that transition?
I mean, pretty quickly I left the dance company and ran away with the circus company. You know, as a kid, I spent a lot of time up trees and my dad rigged ropes for me in the garden and stuff. So I always really enjoyed the exhilaration of that. I wouldn't say I was a height junkie, though. I'd say I have a healthy respect for the height that I'm working at. But the circus company that I joined, we were touring theatres. So, you know, you can't work any higher than the proscenium arch if you're touring the theatre. So most of the time, I guess, we were rigged at 6-8 meters. So it was quite a long time into my career as an aerialist before I really encountered height.
It feels to me like there were these little pockets of aerial dance that happened. I interviewed Nancy Smith recently, and she talked about the Seattle, California, Colorado kind of pocket. But I feel like there was this other pocket that was happening in London in the 80s at this time. Do you have any context about what was going on or how that happened?
I mean, I would say in the 80s and early 90s in the UK, there was more of a kind of new circus movement.
What is that? What is new
New
circus?
circus. So there's a really strong history of traditional circus in the UK. I mean, really strong. But new circus, so I guess as a real baseline, it wasn't working with animals. It was also taking the circus into the theatre. I'm not saying that hadn't ever been done before, because it had been done for such a long time in the UK, but it was also kind of creating these smaller companies who were more able to tour. You know, Rara Zoo, when I first met them, it was kind of this real mix of cabaret, also kind of really an homage to vaudeville and everything that happened during that period. So in terms of aerial dance, I'm not really aware of how much that you would call aerial dance was happening during that time. I mean, in extemporary dance theatre, what we did was definitely aerial dance, because
Because you were in the air and you were dancing, so by definition, right?
I was in there, I was definitely dancing and hanging. So yeah, it's definitely aerial dance. My first exposure to the idea of aerial dance was a company in London called Momentary Fusion, who I worked with I think I joined them in 1996, but I'm probably wrong in saying this. I think Momentary Fusion were around from the early 90s, maybe 93. And they were the first company working in the UK that I personally came across who said they were aerial dance practitioners. And also at that time, you know, in the early 90s in the UK, there were quite a few companies who were trying to mix traditional circus with dance. So I also worked with another incredible company called Gandini Juggling Project, who mixed dance and juggling. And at the time, it wasn't very popular.
Oh, no?
I mean, we would maybe get, 3 men and a dog turning up to see the show. You look at where, I don't know if you're aware of Gandini Juggling Project, but they are this world.
I do. I love their work. Yeah.
And it's incredible to see, that they're working with the Royal Ballet. They've just done a homage to Cunningham. And it's incredible when I think back to the 90s when we were just starting out. And people just thought, I think we won the Time Out Award for the worst idea of the year, combining juggling and dance. And, now you just want to go to that critic. Just look at them now. They were just way ahead of their time.
I love that. In the UK, it seems like there's a lot of different companies. There's a lot of people to work for. There's a lot of collaboration happening. When you graduated from dance school and started all of this work, were you doing this full time? Did you ever have like a normal people job, or did you ever need to support yourself in any other way?
I mean, I think I've been incredibly fortunate, and I think I've landed in the right place at the right time. I've always done this. I've always either danced or done some kind of circus skill. In the latter years, mostly aerial, but no, that's always how I've made my living. I think I've been really lucky. It's not true for everybody in the UK, although I think, we have an arts funding system here, which isn't perfect, but it's incredible that we have an arts funding system here, which supports you in your practice.
So as you develop in your career, what are the concepts and themes that you like to play with as an artist?
Yeah.
I gave you some warm-up questions, and now we're getting into the real
Yeah, now you're really getting stuck in there, Shannon. I think I'm interested in lots of different things. It's hard to narrow it down to specifics. I guess I'm much more a movement practitioner than a theatre practitioner. That's my background. It's that kind of choreographic aesthetic is where I'm happier. Having said that, the last big production that we did in Gravity and Levity was really challenging myself and the company to see how we could deal with narrative. And, it was quite a narrative. It was about war. It was comparing. This was back in 2014, which was the centenary of the First World War, and it was looking at the war that was currently happening in Afghanistan and the war that had happened 100 years previously, and kind of drawing a comparison. And rather than the celebration of war, it was more about the pity of war. But it was really drawing on true stories and running this story that had 100 years difference, running them side by side, one story running backwards and one story running forwards. And that was quite a challenge. I mean, the thing with Gravity and Levity, the thing I like to do with the company is rather than it necessarily being about my artistic idea, Gravity and Levity exists purely selfishly for me to bring in great directors and choreographers that I really admire and really want to work with, because I still want to be pushed as an artist and as a creative. And so that's kind of why I made that company, is to bring in other choreographers to keep pushing the boundaries of what I know. Because if it's just about what I know, then we're not going anywhere.
Well, I don't know. I think you know a lot and you have the capacity to teach a lot and evolve a lot yourself and evolve other artists, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of sit with these two different hats. I have Gravity and Levity, which is about me really sending the work in a particular direction that piques my curiosity at that time. And we're all evolving and that changes constantly. And then my work as an independent artist is where I'm able to go in, I might go in as a performer or a choreographer or a teacher or a mentor, but that is much more about facilitating other people's work. And I'm just picking up on what you were saying about, guiding other people. That's also, so when I started Gravity and Levity, it was really about live production. It was really about me following that creative idea and bringing other people in to work for the company. And that's really how we started out in 2003. And then as time went by, I realized that actually I was as interested, if not now more interested, in finding like-minded community and in growing and nurturing that next generation of artists and finding ways to keep opening up those pathways, so this next generation can, it's dreadful. I'm about to say can really fly with it, can take it so much further. When I first started out, also listening to Nancy talk, it's kind of, there wasn't that much around at the time. And so there's quite a lot of people around that you have to nod to and go, yes, they were really at the beginning. They were part of these foundations. And now people can flourish from that, because there's a strong foundation now and people can just build on that and take it way further than I could possibly have imagined.
Yeah. It sounds like when you were describing what Gravity and Levity is, it almost sounds like, in that you bring on directors and choreographers, it almost sounds like you're giving them a platform or you've created a structure. And I mean more like administratively than artistically, so that you can come in and help give them a place to develop their work.
Yeah. And also for the artists that we bring in. And, there's so much for me as well about collaboration. If it's just my vision can take us to a certain place. And then beyond that, I'm so much more interested in bringing people in to help us realize that. Collaboration for me, it's the heart of the company. It's where we can really push and thrive.
I told you earlier about this grant that I'm writing and this project that I'm working on with a director. And it's very interesting because it's the first time as a solo artist who is used to showing up and either doing their work or being on short-term projects or running my own business. It's the first time that I've ever had to truly collaborate on something that is my vision, but also now I'm bringing someone else in to share that vision. And sometimes we're looking at the same thing, but we're looking at it from different angles. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When do you fight for the angle that you're looking at? And then when do you let it go? Do you know? How does that work for you?
It's a process of negotiation and keeping those lines of communication open. So you keep talking about the project, you keep talking about the ideas, and eventually the more you're both able to open up and also to listen, to not just put your own point across, to really listen to what the bigger picture is, it will distill. At some point it will distill and you'll end up with the fingers crossed, you'll end up with the best possible amalgamation of those ideas. There are times when you do have to fight, but I think so much of the time it's also about letting go of your fear of what you want to see happen, letting go of ego. But I would say a lot of the time it's about fear and being open and receptive yeah, really listening in. You came together to work on something, and you came together for a very good reason. So keep pushing those doubts aside and listen in.
I love that answer. I love it because it normalizes that idea that you're going to talk a lot about it and there's going to be maybe some conflict.
Yeah,
And that's part of the process. It's
yeah.
not like you bring an idea to the table, they bring an idea to the table, and then the best idea wins, or, one person decides to slash and burn the other one. But
I'm
there's
sure
like
that
this, like,
happens sometimes, but that's not really collaboration.
no, sure. Yeah. That's, no, that's super helpful. In the company, do you cast yourself? Are you on stage performing as part of this? Or what capacity do you take if you have a director or choreographer who's, taking that role? What is your role in these projects?
It changes from one project to another. Sometimes I cast myself. um, and
Good for
that
you.
And that is because I'm still really, I'm still hungry as a physical body, as a curious body. I still want to be in that space. I do actually have an agreement with one of my board of directors that she will tell me when I'm too old. She'll tell me when it's time to stop in case I don't recognize myself.
She has like a safe word or something where she's just like,
No, maybe we should. I think I'll recognize, if I think about the trajectory of my career and how it's evolved, my interests always, I'm always led by my heart and my curiosity. It's not that I've gone, in 5 years' time I want to be here. It's never happened like that. It's always been kind of following my nose, my curiosity. And now I've completely forgotten what you asked me.
oh yeah, no. Well, I mean, I asked you what's your role, if not
So,
choreographer or director or artistic lead on these projects? Like,
yeah.
where do you put yourself? And it sounds like a variety of places depending on the project.
Yeah, it's a variety of places. I mean, first and foremost, I'm within the company, I'm fundraiser and producer and administrator. And I talk about the company as we because I couldn't manifest the things that we do without there being other people, but we're a project-led company. So, the company only works when there's funding. I mean, gravity and levity is my passion, so I wouldn't say it's a full-time paid occupation, but it's definitely a full-time occupation for me. And that's where the other freelance work supports that. I would also say live performance doesn't interest me as much as it used to. But I'm very much an advocate for seeing older bodies on stage and those kind of bodies of knowledge. We carry so much information, and I love seeing older performers. And that's not to say that I don't absolutely adore seeing youth and exuberance and energy and all of that on stage. I just think there's a place for all of it. And I think particularly within the aerial arts, I mean, there are more mature practitioners now. But, you look at the festivals and it is predominantly people of a certain age, non-disabled. Yeah, I just think there's space for so much more to be happening and would be much richer for us embracing all of the things, all of their ages, all of their ethnicities, the disabled bodies, the non-disabled bodies. Yeah.
Recently, Lindsey, I have to tell you, I have a friend who's who came up with this idea, so I can't give myself credit for it. But there's a festival in Switzerland called Young Stage, and I forgot the age limit for it now, but whatever it is, there's a cap. And I want to create a festival called Old Stage, and there's a minimum age, and then you have to be over that age to enter it. Because I am also meeting so many amazing artistic minds and creators. But what I find through this podcast and just through traveling and everything is that those people tend to be the ones who have to do kind of what you're talking about, the labor of administration, of funding, of producing the work to give platforms to everyone else. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of places where they can sheerly show up as the artist who are platformed by other people.
Yeah, I think it gets harder as you get older, as you take on more life responsibilities. So there's a point, where for some people in their life, they decide to have a family, or they decide they want to run their own company or create their own festival or run their own space. And with that ambition also, understandably, comes all that other work that you have to do to support that. So inevitably, your practice starts to take a back seat. And I mean, I can only speak for myself. I'm sure it's the same for so many people out there. But for me, it's a constant push to keep, a constant battle actually, to keep my physical practice as active as everything else that I want to be doing to support the sector, to keep everything growing. It's a tricky balance to find.
One thing that Chantal said to me, and I think it was from Susan Murphy originally, but someone in that great lineage talked about this idea of that no one teaches you how to get old. When you're at the very beginning of your career, there's so many people, there's so many resources, there's so many places where you can go to look for help, to look for a leg up, to get those first opportunities. But at the other side of that, like it's almost like who mentors the mentors, and where do you find leadership or guidance now?
With my peers. So with people like Chantal and Jen Patterson, we've currently got some funding, some international collaboration funding to be meeting up to actively support each other, because we asked that very same question: who's supporting the people who are leading the sectors? And particularly during the last 2 years, it was a privilege to be able to offer support to artists to be able to give work to people over the last couple of years when, there wasn't so much happening. There wasn't the amount of live performance happening, and to be someone that people could turn to for advice and all of that kind of stuff. That there's also the responsibility of that can weigh quite heavily sometimes. And so it feels like to be able to turn to peers. I tend to do a lot of work in the vertical dance community as well. And, there are some inspirational women in that community who, we do a lot to support each other. So it's a lot of people who are around a similar age supporting each other. And, whether that's kind of coaching or just listening or providing the space for somebody to come in. I mean, for one of these sessions that I'm doing with Jen Patterson and Chantal, it's, bringing in an outside coach to work with us, but also for us to meet as physical bodies in the space in the first instance, because we're all running our own companies and running festivals and creative professional development events, creating live performances. And, it's what I was saying about we all met as young practitioners performing. And so there's something really lovely there about coming together as physical bodies in the space and meeting on that level again, to then take us into the kind of more nitty-gritty stuff of running the organizations and helping each other out with the difficulties that we're all currently experiencing, whatever that is, whether that's to do with how the company runs or funding or any of that kind of stuff. It's a really lovely thing to meet in a physical space first.
Yeah, I love that. And also, I will say that I think that whether you're cognizant or not of this, I think that by having those kinds of collaborations with Chantal and Jen, you are also showing us in the next generation how we can proceed forward in this spirit of collaboration rather than competition. As people below start running companies and start doing those things, to look to each other rather than turn against each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. Spirit of collaboration, not competition. Love it. Yeah. It has to be about that. There's space for everybody. There's
There's plenty of vertical space. That's for sure.
Multidimensionality of the space and all
of it. Yes. Speaking of which, I want to get into vertical dance because, when I think of Lindsey Butcher, even before I met you, people were like, she is vertical dance. She's the one. She's not maybe the master, but a master, absolutely, of vertical dance. Can you explain, first of all, what vertical dance is? How do you explain it to someone who's never seen it, doesn't know it?
So I would say, vertical dance uses ropes and harnesses for the most part to create dance on a vertical surface. So vertical dance is usually referencing the surface that you're working on. But, vertical dance could also be you working on a diagonal. So mostly we talk about vertical dance and imagine vertical dance as against a building or against pillars, against a structure, against a tree, against something that has a verticality. But that can be too constraining, and I've definitely also seen vertical dance that had no ropes or harnesses. If you see people bouldering, and actually, there's a lot to be said about vertical dance coming out of those climbing routes, of people setting climbing routes and considering. It's Fabrice from company Retourmont in France who really talks quite eloquently about this, about, when he, as a young climber, when he started setting those climbing competition routes, he was setting them with the audience in mind. He was looking at it as a spectator sport as much as he was looking at it for that athleticism of the climbers.
Oh my gosh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and so vertical dance, it kind of came out of the sport climbing movement, and it also absolutely came out of the postmodern dance of Tricia Brown, Lucinda Childs, all of that Judson Church postmodern movement, who were really playing with our experience of space, our experience of audience. Where are the audience viewing from? What is it they're viewing? Everyone always talks. Tricia Brown, Man Walking Down the Side of a Building, is kind of a real classic of that, but also Floor of the Forest, a lot of that early Tricia Brown work where she was really challenging, what is the dance form? Who is it for? So vertical
and where
dance,
does it happen?
has its roots in both of those camps, I would say.
As a longtime circus artist, aerial practitioner, I will say, and I will admit now, I looked at vertical dance at first and was like, are you kidding me? Is that aerial? You're not using your arms at all. How hard can this be? And then I put on a rope and harness and was humbled very quickly.
Yeah.
What does training look like for vertical dancers when you're looking at artists for your company, when you're looking at, projects that you're doing, when you're mentoring individual artists, especially in regards to vertical dance? What does that look like?
I would say dancers take really well to vertical dance because it's a dance form. It's absolutely a dance form. And I think the tricky thing for dancers to get their head around is that shift through 90 degrees. In fact, I think the tricky thing for aerialists to get their head around, because as aerialists, we're very used to being upright and upside down. But that shift of 90 degrees really messes with your head. It's really discombobulating, and also I think there's something about that shift of 180 degrees, which we're so much more familiar with. So, if you were to say to someone, which way's up, they would still be able to tell you, or they'd be able to say either, or, what's above my head? Oh, well, the floor's above my head now. But if you shift through that 90 degree plane, it's so discombobulating. And I think a lot of the training is to do with trying to understand that. Also because, if we think about the spine, the head will always be trying to orientate itself on the spine. To some extent, that's pretty easy if you're upside down or if you're upright. As soon as you're 90 degree, the head doesn't quite understand that plank position. So your head is always wanting to lift and come to upright. And I think with vertical dance as well, you pass through so many of those planes and you can hold so many of those planes rather than just passing through them. So I think there's a lot of spatial orientation that happens in harness. And also it's so much about this front surface of the body. It's, if you think you're holding a plank and you're only supported pretty much from your center, from just below your belly button. So that whole front line of your body, your neck, the abs, kind of all the way down through your legs. Or if you're standing sideways in a plank, then it's that same thing, but it's on that one side. So yeah, it's such a different strength. And I totally get it. I see aerialists and, I wouldn't say I'm practicing rope or fabric or trapeze or any of those things anymore. But, I would see people look at vertical dance and go, yeah, that's easy. And then you realize you get on the wall and finding your grounding on the wall, like finding how you stand, how you find your feet and ground on the wall, in the way that how do you ground on a piece of aerial apparatus? What's your connection through that piece of aerial apparatus? Well, you can't ground through this one connection point underneath your navel, it's kind of, so your connection has to be through your wall, through your surface. But you're dealing with gravity in such your sense of gravity is so shifted. God, that was a long answer to your.
That was an excellent answer, though. That, like, first of all, really validated my experience of being on that wall and just being like, where is up, where is down? And why, like, dancers would take to it so quickly, because their idea of spatial awareness and space in general, I feel like dance has a much more sophisticated conceptualization of that than a gymnast or a circus artist, because for a lot of us, we're trained as like relationship to apparatus or relationship to skill, or like it's a body thing. Whereas in dance, or at least the dance I've studied, it's you look at time, you look at space, you look at architecture, you look at things that are outside of just the body as part of the whole.
Yeah, and I don't think this is true of. I think the way aerial is evolving, I'm looking at so many people using their equipment now as a contact dance partner, and so I'm kind of just contradicting. I'm sort of contradicting myself at the same time. I think dancers' awareness of surface and contact it's slightly different, and that's not to say that aerialists don't have an extraordinary awareness of surface, but it tends to be so much more specific to, or kind of really honed in on specific areas of the body, whereas I think dancers have probably met the surface of the floor with the floor with almost every surface of their body at some point. I need to go away and think about that a little bit more, but I do think it's to do with that proprioception, that sense of surface, of contact, of how much weight, how little weight. Yeah, those gradations.
Well, and I also think, dance shares, dance shares this with theater in a way that circus, where like setting or like design or aspects, like I was talking about earlier, architecture is like hopefully like an unignorable aspect of dance, especially if we're talking vertical dance. What you're hanging on, what you're hanging off of, what that space is that you're in contact with, really changes and almost necessarily has to become a part of the piece. Whereas like if you're doing aerial tissue, that surface, that space, that thing is what I'm always in relation with. And that doesn't change from venue to venue, place to place. I don't incorporate anything else.
You absolutely want that to want your fabrics to remain a constant. You don't want that. Whereas, you're absolutely right. With vertical dance, you are responding. You're responding to whatever you're working on. If you're working on a tree, that's such a different experience to working on a building. If you're working on a building, does it have, what is the architecture? So you can look at a building and you can imagine a dance on that building, and you can think, I want to use that. I want to point up that space there. I really want to draw the audience's attention to the detail of that space there. And you can imagine all of that, but then it has to be a collaboration with your rigger, because then you've figured out your dream of what you want this piece to look like. And then you talk to the rigger and they go, no, you've got one rigging point. You go, I've got 10 people on the building and this is going to, and they're going, yeah, you've got one rigging point and it's there. It's right by that drain pipe, which wasn't what you'd imagined at all. So I think, our discipline, the aerial discipline, absolutely has to be that constant conversation, dialogue between the artist and the creative rigger. And I think the creative rigger in vertical dance is you have to have a incredibly creative rigger who's on your side and is willing to fight your battles with you in terms of getting those permissions, and willing to work with you in convincing people that that's what they want on their building, and that you're going to do it in the safest possible way, and it's going to be incredible.
Incredible, yes. That collaboration between the aerial dancer or director and the creative rigger, because what I see, and I see this actually in the UK, I became very cognizant of it, how many riggers there are out there, or how much availability there is in relation to what I've seen in the States and North America, to have these people who have a lot of experience with non-traditional spaces, who can problem solve in that way.
Yeah.
And I keep wondering, like, why isn't the creator also the rigger? Or have that design capacity? Do you know, like, how much rigging experience or
Yeah,
like knowledge, maybe not experience, do you have, even on a theoretical level?
I'm probably not the best example.
Okay.
I'm definitely not the best example. I would say quite a few of my vertical dance colleagues, I would say Vanda Moretti and Fabrice from Retournement, Amelia from Bandaloop.
Yeah.
I would, definitely Vanda and Fabrice are imagining their rigging. It is as much a part of their vertical dance choreography as the actual steps, and the partnering work and everything else is. They're envisaging their rigging systems as well. That is a particular skill set that I, for one, don't have.
And so for you, do you like reverse engineer it then, where if you're not designing the rigging, do you show up, see what rigging you could work with, and then choreograph around that?
Yeah, I mean, there's usually several site visits that you would go to with the rigger, and you would, the rigger and whoever the client is, if it's a commercial gig, for example, and you would look at what's available in the space, and then you and the rigger would get access to the roof, and you'd figure out actually, so you can talk to the rigger and go, I'd really like this is what I'm seeing. Yeah, and then the reality is you deal with what's available to you or what you can install in that amount of time. In the UK, so much is about getting permission from whoever is the gatekeeper of the building. So much about that.
You have Gravity and Levity, your company.
Yeah.
And then you said you work as a freelance artist, which looks like, it sounds like a teacher, a choreographer and director in your own right, a mentor, all of these different hats that you wear. Yeah. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis, or how did you cultivate like that side of the career?
I mean, I think that side of my career has always been there. And I've the more experience I've got, I've gradually evolved into a place where I feel like I have something to offer as a mentor. I don't think I had that 30 years ago. Particularly. So that side of my career has always been there. And then once I formed the company, in the UK, you can apply to be a national, it's called a national portfolio organisation, where you get 3 years guaranteed funding. And over the years, people have said to me, oh, you should apply to be a national portfolio organisation. You're doing so much of this development work for the sector, as well as the live production work. And I just always run a mile when somebody says that, because what I really love about having the company and still maintaining this kind of independent work is the diversity of that. And is that one feeds the other. I mean, quite literally, the one feeds the other. I earn money as an independent artist, which I can then put into the company, or I can pay myself to give my time to the company, which I wouldn't be able to do nearly as much with the company if that wasn't the case. But it's more and more important for me to keep that independent strand, to be able to go and teach at other people's festivals or to go in and mentor artists. I think for my own sanity of just not disappearing into the administration and the fundraising and the booking accommodation and contracting and all the rest of it that goes with bringing a project to life if it's your company. So, and it makes me much more appreciative of going into other people's organizations and going, hey, I'm here. What do you need from me? I'm here for you. What can I help you realize, because you know that you haven't had to book the accommodation and you haven't had to do any of that stuff. It's all been done for you, and what a luxurious position to be able to walk in there as someone who can help facilitate that vision. You're in quite a privileged position there, but I think as an independent artist, until I started running my own company, I didn't fully appreciate that. I didn't realize what a luxury it is to be I'm not saying it's easy, but to be an independent artist, and not have to deal with any of that other stuff.
Well, I don't know if it's a luxury. I mean, I think that it's like important to have, housing and those kinds of things when you're on site somewhere. But what goes into it definitely is like, oh my gosh, so much more than I think I even see most of the time as someone who doesn't coordinate these things, for sure.
Yeah. It really brings home to me the amount of graft that people have to do to bring a project to life. So all of that stuff that you don't see if you're walking into an organization, you're walking in as an artist and you've been employed as an artist because they want you there for all the skills and everything, and all your life experience that you bring. You're very valuable in that organization, but you haven't had to set it up. And until you've been on the other side of that, it's hard to have empathy or understanding for the amount of work that takes.
So because you've worked on both sides of the coin, for people like myself who are just independent artists who have never set up anything like that before.
I really didn't mean just independent artists. I mean independent artists.
No. I know.
Not negating.
My words, not yours, for sure. But I mean, I think the question is, what can we do? Or if we want to be helpful, but we don't have the other side of the coin experience, what are the things that like when you have someone walk in, or what do you do now that you know both sides of the coin, when you're walking in as a gun for hire to make life a little easier?
Yeah, I'll ask if there's anything I can do to help.
Yeah.
Beyond my role of, whatever I've gone in there for, teacher, and if you can see that something in the space isn't happening and you know that it needs to be done, take that responsibility, go. If you can see that the space hasn't been swept, and you've got a whole load of people about to come in, and whoever is running that event is wearing their many different hats and trying to do loads of things, you can see that the floor needs
Grab
sweeping.
A broom.
Just do it.
Yeah,
take that initiative.
Cool. Love that. So what's next? What are the things that you want to check off the list, maybe with Gravity and Levity or as an independent artist? I will say also, I love that point that you made about running your company, but not getting sucked into like the funding administrative, like hole that you could fall into, but using your role as an independent artist and having that variety to kind of feed you and still be out in the community and not just in your own world.
I mean, I don't always get that balance right.
Well, that's why it's a balance, right?
Right now, I'm definitely in that hole of doing all of that. But, it does mean that it feeds. I guess I'm happy to do all of that work. I like writing the funding applications, weirdly. Some kind of sadomasochistic.
It does help clarify a project in a way. It forces you to sit down and be like, what is this? Yeah,
if you have to articulate it. And on the funding forms that we currently have here, you're allowed 600 characters, So, I mean, you really have to distill. You really have to get the essence of your project across. And it's good. It's really good for, being able to articulate what it is you want to do. Because I know I'm such a feely person, getting my head around all of, but how would you describe that to somebody? How would you sum it up in one sentence? It's a great exercise for me to have to do that. Doing all of that, I am able to see that you end up with some great projects, and it's just making sure that you have the time and the energy to actually really fully commit to those projects and enjoy them while you're in there. If you're running a festival, are you still running around in all of your many different roles, or at some point are you actually able to look at what you and your team and all of the artists you brought in to help run this thing, to look at what you've created and be and take pride in that, really celebrate that. I think sometimes we're running so much we don't take the time to really see what it is that we've created. So we're about to go into two international collaborations. So it's myself and a colleague I already mentioned, Vanda Moretti, and Kate Lawrence, and it's a British Council international collaboration. And we did one section the first part of it happened in Venice back in May, I think, and that was working with 15 male refugees from 8 different countries. And it was introducing them to the idea of vertical dance and suspension, and this idea of, and it was working with those postmodern ideas of who is this for? And looking at use of space and who is allowed in that space. That was the first part of the project, and it was really quite remarkable and humbling and joyous. We danced with these 15 men in the space. We had no idea what was going to happen, and it was it was a joy. Anyway, next week we go into working in a school in Wales with some neurodivergent children, non-verbal children, children with various physical disabilities, which we won't know till we enter the school. And again, it's working in harnesses and looking at suspension and flight, and also working with an incredible aerial set designer who will come in and we'll model make with some of the young people and see how we can take those things into the air. And then the following week, I'm at home in Brighton working with 6 deaf and disabled dancers and kind of expanding on some of those ideas in a studio in Brighton.
That's incredible.
See, so we're incredibly lucky that we get these opportunities to do.
Wait, so are these projects like with the refugees in Wales, the deaf and disabled dancers, are these projects that you conceptualize or you invited into them?
So it was myself and Kate Lawrence and Vanda Moretti we've taught quite a bit together over the last couple of years, and we've run a couple of projects together. And last year, during lockdown, we ran an online series called Portrait and Landscape, which was about bringing 12 international vertical dance choreographers. So it was an hour online. 12 international vertical dance choreographers weren't allowed to speak, or the thought was it wasn't about them speaking about their practice, because everybody knows who they are. So it was about them offering a gift to the vertical dance community and then introducing a next generation vertical dance artist. And there were some incredible next generation vertical dance artists. That was really exciting. And kind of on the back of that, we were saying, what's our next project? And we found this pot of funding from the British Council, because now that we've done this Brexit thing, and you did say I was allowed to swear, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
It means that opportunities to work in Europe and collaborate in Europe, but if you live in the UK now, are pretty non-existent. Thank you very much, UK government. And so British Council are working quite hard to ensure that there are still these artistic exchanges. So they came up with this pot of funding for people, and we applied as a means of, just extending our ongoing collaboration, seeing where else we could take it, what work we were interested in doing. Yeah.
That's so cool. It sounds like fostering the next generation of aerial and vertical dancers is about having people who are different, who are disabled, who come from different backgrounds.
I think for everything, I think for vertical dance, for aerial dance, for any kind of art form, for society, it has to be about welcoming and celebrating difference.
Mm-hmm.
It's society we want to live in, surely.
Yeah.
And so, if the arts are reflective of society or shining a light, yes, it has to absolutely be about welcoming everybody in. Yeah. Much richer palette is available to us all. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the work you're doing. That's awesome.
Oh, the thing I haven't spoken about, though, is we run a thing called Dissecting Aerial, which is a 2-day aerial symposium, and it will happen in January. And it's a hybrid symposium, so it happens online and also live at a venue in Brighton. It was the first time we got to do the hybrid version last year. I was incredibly nervous. I really don't do tech at all. I was really nervous. But actually what it meant was we were able to connect to, I think we had 6 international speakers and UK speakers. And we were working across all of these different time zones. So just trying to make all of that work was a bit of a head scratcher for me. But it's called Dissecting Aerial. But it's bringing together professional aerial practitioners, movement practitioners, sports scientists, sports psychologists. We've had incredible speakers in the past, and I'm just starting to pull together the presenters for next year's symposium. So hey, if anybody's got any ideas, contact me. If there's anyone you really want to hear from, you should contact me at Gravity and Levity. But yes, also please do join us for that symposium. Yeah, it's a great place for discussion and furthering the art form that we all love.
Yeah, very cool. And I'll make sure to put all the links to that and everywhere they can find information about the symposium in the show notes so they can grab that.
It won't go on sale until probably early November because I've yet to program it. But
yeah. I can't imagine why. It's with all that free time you've got.
It's not like
It's not like you're jetting about hanging people of all different nationalities and abilities in the air and, at the same time trying to get funding for 6 projects that are happening in 2025 or whatever else you're doing.
Yeah. And then doing a little vertical dance duet with the fabulous Lee Clayton every now and again. So, yeah.
Oh, what a legend.
That.
Lindsey, I have a final question for you.
Okay.
Which I ask all my guests, which is, what advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career? And you can think about this a couple of different ways. You can think about it as literally like if you have a time machine, you could go back at some point at the beginning of your career and say something that would change everything. And or you could think about it like if someone wanted to have the career that you did, wanted to be the next Lindsey Butcher, what advice would you give them?
I think I referenced this a little bit earlier. To follow your curiosity, to follow your heart. There needs to be a certain amount of finances in there, practicality of how we make a living doing this stuff. But if you're following your heart, if you're following your passion, if you stay open, stay really curious about what's out there, where else you could be looking, what are you not seeing? Yeah, then you're not going to regret anything. You're just going to have experiences.
Cool. Lindsey, thank you so much for taking the time today. This was a pleasure.
Thanks, Shannon.
Yay! Thanks for listening, friends, fans, and foes. I'll talk at you next week. In the meantime, go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and show some love, send some support, just like these fine Patreons that you're about to hear the voices of right now. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Hi, my name is Noah and I do hand balancing. Hi, my name is Woody and I do Leo. Thank you for listening to the Artist Athlete podcast.
Hi everyone, I'm Dominique, a ground acrobat, trapeze artist, and coach, currently bringing circus to the extremely cold but very beautiful Northern Ontario, Canada. Circus has changed my life and I'm so grateful to everyone in this community. Find me on Instagram at DomUpsideDown or my website domupsidedown.com.
Aloha! My name is Beth Russell and I live on the beautiful island of Maui, Hawaii. I am an aerial artist and movement instructor specializing in chakra yoga to keep me balanced and grounded. I play with silks, trapeze, lyra, rope, acro, aerial yoga and dance, slacklining, pole, bungee, and climbing. Really anything that goes up and allows me to explore 3D space. You can find my dedicated aerial page on Instagram at Maui Aerialist. If you find yourself coming to Maui, let's play.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete podcast, straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and swing and rope by night. I really, really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus, and that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.
Hey there, artists and athletes. This is Andy Smith, owner and artistic director at Saltaire Circus School in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And I want to thank you for contributing to the Artist Athlete podcast. If you ever find yourself down in Florida, come check us out. Whether you're an artist, athlete, or someone ordinary just looking to be extraordinary, we got a place for you.